It's 10:02 and hello and welcome to the San Diego Museum of Art guest lecture series brought to you today by the docents of San Diego Museum of Art. Today's lecture is with Marianela de la Hoz, and my name is B. Barraza, and I want to welcome you to today's lecture and also to take this opportunity to acknowledge the incredible work that has gone in to making the guest lecture series possible. We've learned a lot of new things this year, some of which feel profoundly meaningful and yes, somewhat crazy making as we adapted to a new reality. This happens to be my last lecture as chair of programs, and the past 15 months have been quite an experience, a real challenge and yet a lot of fun. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and supporting the guest lecture series. And an especial heartfelt thank you to David Miles, Mary Grillo, Jim Grebel, and Marilyn Woods for all the work they put into making the lecture series possible. And also to thank every speaker that we invited. They didn't hesitate to say yes with this new reality. It's been really heartfelt and very emotional for me. But I think I want to tell you all that I personally feel very fully supported during this extraordinary time. People volunteered, kind words of praise were given, and everyone pulled in the same direction. And the good news is this fall, David Miles and Mary Grillo will be setting up an exciting 2021 to 2022 series with inspired and interesting speakers. And haha, I get to sit where you are and enjoy the experience. So before we begin, I do want to remind you that during the lecture, you're able to ask questions of our speaker in the Zoom chat function. You know where that is. The questions and comments will be curated by Mary Grillo as part of the question and answer discussion after Marianela's talk. We also invite you to think about and share in 5 words or less what you learned or experienced during this pandemic, this extraordinary time. Your responses will be curated from the chat function and shared with Marianela along with your questions and questions at the end of the lecture. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you to our guest lecturer, Marianela de la Hoz, who's we all love dearly. Marianela was born in Mexico City and has lived in the US for the last 20 years. Her artwork has been exhibited in prestigious galleries, as well as several museums, universities, and cultural institutes in Mexico and the United States, Canada, the United Arab Emirates, Japan, and Germany. In 2014, she received the prestigious San Diego Art Prize for her tempera paintings. Her work is extremely detailed, delicate, and precise. She seeks to present hidden insights into the character of her subjects through visual codes and exaggerated details. I tell you, we docents have had a wonderfully challenging time decoding her work. Paintings from the Confinement, which is installed in the American galleries, features Marianela's response to what it has meant to her to navigate and engage during the COVID pandemic. And now, please help me welcome the artist, Marianela de la Hoz.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to all of you who are joining us today, to the Docent Council for inviting me to participate in this lecture. Thanks to B. Barraza, Mary Grillo, David Miles, Jim Grebel, and Marilyn Woods for their passion and commitment setting these lectures. I hope to be able to rise to the challenge of doing a good job, as the previous speakers and presentations have been extraordinary. I don't know if David will share now. Okay, perfect. Today, I want to talk about paintings from the confinement. a series of artworks that are exhibited at the San Diego Museum of Art. They were created during the long months that this nightmare has lasted. I am a visual artist. Images are the alphabet of my mother tongue. For me, the written words are also typographic images. So for today's talk, I decided to write a few reflections to avoid forgetting what I want to communicate. Failure to remember is another consequence that fear and isolation left in me. And of course, my age and the difficulties of talking before an audience. When the lockdown began, I was working on the last painting of a set of 21 works for an exhibition, which was supposed to open in the summer of 2020 at the Timken Museum of Art. The title of the exhibition is Destejidas, Unwoven. It talks about 21 historical, mythical, and contemporary women. The purpose of the series is to unweave commonplace conceptions of their stories and then weave a new tapestry from their narrative, personality, and achievement. The common thread through these works is addressing how these women were forgotten, abused, or slandered during their lives and also by history. The first painting of the series shows Penelope, wife of Odysseus, who despite faithfully waiting for the return of her husband, was urged to remarry. Thus treated by their suitors as women were treated, as property changing from one owner to another. Penelope, however, conceived a plan to deceive them, promising that when she finished weaving a funerary shroud for Odysseus' father, she would marry one of the new suitors. Penelope wove during the day and undid her work at night to give Odysseus more time to return. Suddenly, the coronavirus assaulted me without prior notice, unraveling my plans, my references, leaving me incredulous and speechless. I did not have the elements that Penelope had to continue working on my plans. The first thought I would like to share with you is a fragment of an email that I sent at the beginning of the seclusion to a dear friend who lives in Mexico. I quote, "Nothing seems to have changed in my life. I wake up at 5:30 a.m., I clean, sweep, and mop the floor, paint or try to paint, cook, go back to my brushes, read, sleep, every day exactly the same, regardless of whether it is Thursday or Sunday. You know very well how much I like to be at home painting and how little sociable I am. Ah, but there is something different, an air of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety that gets in through the window, and reality with surreal touches permeates through the walls. Alone in the house, without my children and grandchildren, with my husband out working, my cats are the ones who keep me company. They are my listeners, confessors, therapists, healers. Poor little ones, I hope they survive my crisis." End of quote. When the confinement began, the images that I received by email, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, were poetic messages of optimism and encouragement, accompanied by beautiful landscapes, flowers, animals, children, people gathered, kissing and hugging. Then came the videos with magic tips, home remedies,
You're muted.
Share thoughts and poems.
No se te oye, Marianela. No se te
Oh,
oye.
sorry.
No se te escucha.
Let me see what's happening. Can you hear me now?
Yes. You're good.
Yes.
So, give me 1 minute.
Marianela, the last thing we heard was, and then came the tips and the home remedies and the,
Okay, sorry.
yeah.
Right.
Okay. Then came the videos with magic tips, home remedies, and a number of advices on how to prevent and cure that virus whose image we saw repeatedly every day. This fear surrounded by protuberances crowning it. Many invitations came from my colleagues asking me to upload images, share thoughts and poems. I preferred to watch and was able to see and enjoy works that I already knew, all from yesterday, as if invoking the comfort and normality of the very recent past. I received multiple online petitions and requests to listen to and watch conferences, classes, concerts, podcasts, ballet, opera, theater, virtual visits to museums and galleries. Art appeared everywhere. People recreated paintings by the great masters in a fun exercise using whatever they had handy. For many artists, face masks became a creative support for painting, embroidering, and printing images. Some of my colleagues began to organize support groups, others to sew face masks. I don't know how to sew, and the only thing I could think of was to donate a little money here and there. I became aware of the rise in mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, addictions, domestic violence, and child abuse. With this belief, we began to confirm that optimistic wishes and reality did not square. Visual messages debating the theme of the pandemic were insistently politicized. Memes, criticism, cartoons, phrases were directed to politicians, epidemiologists, and communicators, because the solution to what was happening did not arrive as quickly as we were expecting, and there were no magic recipes that could be created by a presidential decree. The messages became so contradictory that they contributed to dividing and confusing people, as for example, in the wrestling wars between the mask and the no mask. Here in the United States, the visual discourse changed completely when protests exploded across the country after the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Depictions of Floyd and the cause of Black Lives Matter filled posters, banners, murals, photographs, t-shirts. For a moment, the images of the pandemic caused by the coronavirus were forgotten. Another pandemic was the one that came to light. The immense inequality, injustice, classism, racism, poverty, and ignorance, hatred, anger, and at the same time, the spirit of fighting for something better. The presidential election was held during the months of seclusion, and the handling of the pandemic became politicized, putting aside real data and science. In my specific case, at the beginning of the isolation, I froze. For me, painting is the way I understand the world around me and my own world. Suddenly, my simultaneous translation system stopped working. And I was faced with an unknown and unintelligible reality. My work tries to put aside internal censorship. My shyness and fear are removed. My work is dark and full of Black humor and sarcasm. This time, the circumstances were very different. How could I represent something unknown, mysterious, and invisible, something so threatening, painful? A feeling of modesty invaded me, and I could not invoke death in images, the same one that appeared on the threshold of my front door. Perhaps I was afraid of hurting those who had lost a loved one, and I felt the insistent and imminent certainty of my own mortality. I began to question myself very seriously, looking into the mirror. What was the purpose of what I do, especially in these moments? What was and is my contribution to society? The first thing I was able to do. Hmm? Sorry.
Raphael, mute yourself.
Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. The first thing that I was able to draw as a painkiller to relieve the misery of not being able to be with my loved ones was an image full of tenderness. In my work, I rarely include these sweetnesses. I drew my grandchildren who live so far away using a silver point rod. Each stroke served me to caress their image with nostalgia, wondering if I would hug and kiss them again. Faced with so much darkness, a little light was necessary. At last, myself convinced me to return honestly and with conviction with what I am, my essence, to the only thing I know how to do. I began once again trying to find paths, images, symbols, metaphors, references to show, to point out, to translate, and document what the pandemic was causing in the feelings and thoughts of human beings, myself included. For more than a year, I have dedicated myself to paint temperas that speak of what I have lived and observed, what this deadly virus has been causing in people and in their behavior. 2020 global coup d'etat. This was the first representation that I made of the coronavirus. I had to imagine it as a character, a coup that attacked the whole world. Viruses have been described as organisms at the edge of life, since they resemble organisms in that they possess genes evolved by natural selection and reproduce by creating multiple copies of themselves through self-assembly genetic mutations while being subject to natural selection. Viruses displayed a wide diversity of shapes and sizes. I was amazed at how, without much searching in my mental archives, the image of COVID-19 appeared disguised as a crowned skeleton in the manner of the crowned nuns, those who belonged to the Discalced Carmelite order and were adorned on two occasions. The first when taking the vows, renouncing to the outside world to enter in the conventual confinement, and the second when dying. Nature cannot be locked up. Maybe she has been grateful for human seclusion and has continued to exercise her laws. Our children are inheriting a wounded world. I hope they can be wise and smart enough to solve little by little the problems our planet suffers. The loneliness and abandonment of the elderly in this country is not a new thing, but the pandemic brought a wave of beds to older people with no one by their side to hold their hands during their last minutes. The virtual image on the screen can never replace the caressing gaze of a pair of prisoned eyes. Many people searched for the comfort provided by the religion's faiths, asking for forgiveness of their sins to their known deities, as well as to the unknown ones. More than ever, we had lived immersed in the virtuality of the screens. Zoom became a school, an office, a forum, a home, a kitchen, a theater. We became mere two-dimensional images reflected by the electronic devices. Yet, not everyone had access to the internet, a telephone, or a computer. Today, after so many months of confinement, thanks to science, we have a vaccine with which we can protect ourselves and others. It seems that things tend to take order again. Businesses, schools, churches, museums begin to open up, and we can meet with family and friends, take off our masks, and hug each other. However, we are no longer the same we once were. Will we be better or worse after the confinement? Will it have made us more empathetic, freer, or just the opposite, crueler, blinder, more selfish? Have we really learned after having witnessed and lived so much pain, so much uncertainty, so many deaths? Or will we pretend that everything is just the same as where we left it? Undoubtedly, there will be those who have been touched in their own flesh by the disease, perhaps by the death of a loved one, by having lost their job and their modus vivendi, and will be willing to turn their gaze to the pain and losses of others by being more tolerant and understanding. Maybe they will try to improve the world by doing their bit. At the same time, we have seen cases of people who, even after being infected and having recovered, far from becoming more tolerant and understanding, have responded with hatred, frustration, and deception. For example, some politicians who fell ill but who had the best doctors and treatments at their service, once they recovered from the disease, continued to misinform and minimize the dangers of contagion. After all these months of pandemic, the world has rediscovered spaces for dialogue, hope, and cooperation. But also, in general terms, it has become more inhospitable. The pandemic not only brought the coronavirus disease, infecting and causing the death of so many, but it also exposed the economic and social disparity of a highly unequal and divided society. All of us have suffered confinement, uncertainty, and loneliness. However, the level of suffering has not been equitable between people who have the resources to stay under a roof, have food on their table, and access to medicine, and those who have nothing. The deep inequalities of always have become deeper and more evident. Racial, class, and political hatreds have fueled selfishness and amplified these differences where dialogue could have taken place. The vaccine is a scientific marvel for the world. However, not all countries have had the same access to them. The power of money continues to rule. With all the coincidences and differences, what has united all the countries of the world has been the suffering that COVID sowed in all communities democratically, attacking with equal force, exposing our vulnerable, insignificant, and at the same time, very significant existence. In my work, duality is always present, and talking about COVID, either we choose to forget the lesson, trying to return to a reality that no longer exists, or we try to renovate and solve problems through new bases, seeking to make society a little more just. Let us listen to our hearts, to our intellects, to our common humanity. During these very longs of confinement, all of us have changed in many ways. At least for me, it has been a time to reevaluate and confirm that the only treasures I have are my loved ones, family, friends, and art. Everything else remained as non-essential. In my notebook, I keep sketching pictures with these very difficult subjects. There are a lot of themes to paint from, a lot to do and undo. I will follow the lesson of Penelope, who, with her enormous patience and her very proven experience, unwove the fabric of life and prepared herself to weave a new project with what life became and reality allowed. Let's listen to our inner voice. Even if I don't envision a happy ending regarding the devastation that the virus left, for now, this coming Christmas, the grandmother of the story plans to get out of the phone to hug and kiss her grandchildren in person. Thank you very much for your company, your attention, and your patience. Today, let us celebrate life.
Thank you so much, Marianela. That was stunning and so heartfelt. Also, thank you also for sharing your art and your passion with us today and your recollections from this thing we've been through, all of us. And Marianela has dedicated her talk today to Larry Baza, who passed away this year. He was a true champion of the arts and will be so fondly remembered by many in the San Diego arts community. His presence is greatly missed. We've announced that the guest lecture series will be dedicating our June lectures to Larry Baza, as he was a great fighter for artists, the arts, and LGBTQ plus rights. And thank you for being here today with all of us. And I'm going to turn it over to Mary Grillo to make the discussions with the chat.
Great, thank you. I was so moved by this presentation and felt it so deeply. And I think many of us have. And so we would appreciate it if everybody could take a moment and enter into chat how you felt during the pandemic and your experience in 5 words or less. And as you do that, I'll read some off so that we can share our experience of the pandemic together. So let's see, self-reflection and gratitude. So wonderful experience. The museum got me through. Someone's adding. Let's
Mine
see.
is funny.
That getting the laundry done is enough. That's B. So, new ways to stay in touch. That I am very lucky. That the future is unpredictable. Anxious but grateful for friends and family. I felt everything you said, Marianela. Pessimistic, appalled at the federal response. Gratitude for all the essential workers. Time to paint, time to meet new neighbors. So much is not essential.
Sure.
Incredible intensity of connections. So these are some of the thoughts that have been shared. And I think you can see a common thread through all of it, that everyone seems to have identified what meant the most to them during this time. And Renato adds, you are not alone and we are in a better place thanks to people like you. Very few things matter as much as friends. And I think we saw that from many, many people here. So I'm sure people may also have questions in terms of your exhibition. And I know I do. So I thought I'd start off by asking you about one of your paintings that struck me, I think the most in some ways, because I didn't at first understand it. And I was wondering if you could talk about, I wrote down the title, your painting of In Natural Selection, We Lost One Dimension.
Yes, and it's not new. We have been living for some time now inside the screens. So I was thinking that maybe we have lost our third dimension, for holding people, to hold hands, to embrace them, and we are only on a screen. So I was thinking that maybe that was the new evolution, change in humanity, to lose one of our dimensions.
And there it is.
There it is on the screen. For those of you who haven't seen the exhibition or couldn't place the title with the picture, the painting. And it looks as if all these figures have been cut out of a cookie cutter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Repeating the same thing.
Yep.
We,
go ahead.
in some ways, we have lost our own personality, our uniqueness.
And Connie Blair points out that maybe we've lost the dimension of touch.
Yes.
And that was a true loss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Phyllis, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the image of the falling stars, I thought was such a profound presentation of where we stand now as a country. It was really, really quite moving, I thought.
Yeah, the United States that are not united anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question from Anne. Where did you get your training and do you work in other mediums?
Well, I didn't study painting or art. I studied graphic design. And I have been thinking that I did a wise choice, because when I was in the university, they taught me how to think more than the techniques or whatever. And I learned that with every painting, first I have to inform myself of what I want to do. If I'm doing, for instance, the series for the Timken Museum, if I'm going to paint Catherine the Great, I have to read about her life and in many sources so I can have my own interpretation of the story. And that I learned in the university. I have always draw and paint on my own since I was a little girl. And of course, I learned in the university to use acrylics and oil paintings, watercolors, color pencils. But my true love, I found it around 3 years later when I decided to be a painter, because I was going to a group with my mentor, a very good painter in Mexico, Arturo Rivera. And he mentioned to me if I have tried egg tempera, because he noticed that I love the very fine details. And I told him that, well, I would try if he could teach me. He could taught me or teach me whatever, the technique. And he said, no, I don't know how to do that. So he recommended me to the best teacher I could find. And he's Cennino Cennini, a painter from the 15th century, Italian, who wrote a book was called Il Libro dell'Arte. And there I found everything I wanted to know about egg tempera. So I learned with the best teacher. And I have been working in egg tempera for maybe 25 years now.
Wow.
And it's perfect for me because I can be very, very detailed. And it's like preparing the kitchen. It's the kitchen of painters, because you have to prepare your own colors. You use an egg yolk, and you have to prepare the support. It's a long process, but it's very fulfilling for me.
Wonderful. I just wanted to share another reaction. Ray shared that we see only what people want us to see on the screen, and we no longer have glimpses into the spontaneous.
Yes.
Now we have 2 questions about 2 of your paintings. So if we could pull up Rip Van COVID, maybe you could explain that one. And then we have another one that we have a question on too.
Okay. I think that all of us know the story of Washington Irving, Rip Van Winkle. Is this man that drinks something strange and goes to sleep and wakes up 20 years later, and everything he knows has changed. He doesn't recognize anyone. So for me, it was the way to see me, because one day I went to sleep, and after COVID and all the confinement, I changed completely, and I didn't recognize what was happening outside my world. So that's me in a very dark place, wondering if what would happen to me if I was going to be infected, if I was going to die, if someone I love would die, if I would be able to embrace my loved ones again. So that's it. And I use if you see the paintings, I use the COVID sphere in many ways. So in this one, I use it as if they were flowers in a vase. and 2020 gone, the calendar, all the year gone.
And a mask at the bottom of the vase.
Of course, because as you said, if you're on the screen, you put a mask. If you have to go out, you have to put a mask. And
Wow.
Yeah.
So the next painting people have questions on is Alice in the Land of Spectacle. And especially, what is the significance of that Cheshire cat behind her ear?
of course, it's a references to Alice in Wonderland and through the, and it's a feeling that our screens, our phone has become a theater. It's all a spectacle. And we sometimes, and before the isolation, we have been changing our way of seeing. So for instance, you go to a museum and instead of seeing the glorious and the significant painting, people do a selfie and don't see the real thing. And everything has changed, in my opinion, following that path. We live through our cameras, our cell phones, our whatever, and we forget to see the real thing. We take a picture of a beautiful flower instead of the aroma of the flower and seeing the colors and watching it and observe it. And that's the thought around this painting.
And what about the Cheshire cat behind her ear?
Because of the Cheshire cat, remember that he was the one who appeared with Alice, laughing and mocking, and there's the humor of he's laughing at us.
Yes.
That's great. And here's a odd little question, kind of funny. Do you have chickens? Because you must use a lot of eggs in your painting.
No, I don't. I go to the supermarket and buy the eggs there.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions that people have about any?
Okay. Ready?
Just a comment that the Prado, as of 3 years ago, no longer allows phones in the museum for that reason, I think.
Oh,
And here's another question. How many eggs are used in a single painting?
Okay, if a single painting takes around 1 month to be finished, so I use 1 egg a day, so 30 eggs. 30 yolk.
So it has to be a fresh egg every day.
Yes, every day.
Okay. Okay.
wow.
I'm honored to read this on behalf of Tom Noel. On behalf of myself and the Baza family, our many thanks to the SDMA Docent Council, B. Barraza, for this beautiful tribute to Larry. SDMA was his first museum as a child in San Diego. He loved the educational opportunities the museum provides, and he would be greatly honored. Thank you so much, Tom, for that.
Thank you, Tom. And we're all better for having known Larry and you. What can we say? Abrazos. A really heartfelt hug to you. Mary, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, on that note, it's time to say goodbye. And I've just enjoyed seeing you all again so much. And thank you for being here. And please, we hope that you'll join us next year for our traditional third Friday, which begins in September. I have one thing that I neglected, and I must apologize to my dear friend, Michelle Morgan, who has ably assisted me as my teleprompter. You saw her for a second, and I want to say thank you, Michelle. You made this all so much easier for me. And so please join us next year. I hope that you'll be part of us, our wonderful, exciting experience. It'll begin in September 2021. We will keep you posted as we schedule these events, and you can always go on the website, SDMA website, and get updates and see where we're going with this. Please, we'll
Bea,
see. Yes, I hear.
Before you sign off, can I just jump in? I
Yes.
wanted to mention that the docents have prepared a virtual tour of Marianela's exhibition at the museum about the confinement paintings. And check our listings of the virtual tours in July. It's not happening in June yet, but in July, we'll be offering virtual tours of that show. And hopefully any of you who wanted to have more of an experience of Marianela's wonderful paintings can join in on that tour. And that's, of course, in addition to all the other virtual tours we have for the Ana de Alvear, that wonderful exhibition we have of her amazing colored pencil still life paintings, and the masters from the Bemberg collection. So keep looking at the Docent tour page on the website of the museum for more opportunities coming up. And while we don't have a date yet, we're hoping to get back into doing live tours of exhibitions and the permanent collection in the museum sometime in July. So again, keep your eye on our website, and we'll see when that great event will happen, when we can get back in the museum. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bea.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, David. Thank you, Marianela. Thank you.
Thank you so
everyone.
much, Bea.
David,
Bea, you've been wonderful this year. Thank you.
Thank
it's
you.
been my pleasure. It's been a real honor.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah, Kath Jones is sending me a heart. I can't do that. Right back at you, Kath. Oh, goodbye, everyone.